All right, here we are ready for chapter 3, our introduction to the Benson boys. Nothing much got done on the last day of school before spring vacation. There was a spelling bee in the morning and a video of Australia before lunch, and in the afternoon, Miss Applebaum passed around pictures of her nieces and nephews. But just before the final bell, she said, "Remember, class, when you come back after spring vacation, I want to hear that each of you tried something you've never done before." And then she added quickly, "With your parents' permission, of course." Wally had liked it better the first time she had said it without the parents' permission stuff. There were a lot of hoops and shouts and laughter when the doors opened at last. All the students poured outside ready to say goodbye to winter and welcome spring. The Hatfords, however, were getting ready to welcome someone else, the Benson boys, who would be arriving the following day with their parents. Mrs. Hatford had already borrowed cots and air mattresses from the neighbors to make beds for 5 more boys in the house. At breakfast that morning, Mr. Hatford, in his postal worker's uniform, had sat at the breakfast table and said, "Ellen, do you think we're crazy to have 9 boys in the house with us for a week?" "Probably," she replied. "But it's what might happen when you and I aren't here, Tom, that worries me the most. So I told the store I'd be working only half days next week." "Wise move," he said. "I figure the kids will be up late every night and will be sleeping in each morning, so I'm going to work from 8 till 1, then come home and get lunch for everybody. I don't think they can get in too much trouble in the hour or so after they first get up, can they?" "I'm going to pretend you didn't say that," Mr. Hatford had said, and he kissed her on the cheek and headed for the door. They had acted as though Wally weren't even sitting at the table with them eating his cornflakes, mostly because Wally's eyes were always half closed at breakfast, but he had heard and remembered everything they said. What was going through his mind at that moment was, if I'm going to try something I've never done before, I'd better do it between 8 and 1 o'clock before Mom gets home. When the dark green van pulled into the Hatfords' driveway Saturday afternoon, the Hatford boys swarmed outside and almost pulled their friends out of the rear seats, yelling and punching each other and chasing the newcomers around the house. Wally liked Bill Benson the best because they were the same age and they both knew what it was like to be the middle boy in the large family. Bill was a little pudgy and he was always good-natured, just like his brother Danny, a year younger, who had Bill's round face and blue eyes and was even more chubby. The 3 of them used to do things together when the Bensons lived in Buckman. Steve and Tony were closest in age to Jake and Josh. The twins, however, were string bean skinny, while Steve was broad-shouldered and short, and Tony was broad-shouldered and tall. All 4 boys could eat 3 hamburgers apiece and a load of fries without even stopping to burp. Steve was in 7th grade already, but Tony and the Hatford twins would soon be 12. Doug was the youngest, a year younger than Peter. He was a small boy with hair so blonde it almost looked white. "How are you? How was the trip up?" asked Mrs. Hatford, embracing Mrs. Benson while the 2 men shook hands. "Well, it's good to be out of that van," Mrs. Benson said. "Hal and I will be going to the motel later, but we thought we'd stay a little while to chat and help the boys get settled." "You're certainly staying for dinner," said Mrs. Hatford. "Well, that would be lovely," Mrs. Benson said. "You know what I would really like to do? Stroll over to our old house and see how it looks." "Well, you're in luck, Shirley, because Jean Malloy called just this morning to invite us all to tea." "Tea and cookies," she said, "and I thought you might enjoy a little walk after your long trip up from Georgia." Wally elbowed Bill and saw Jake and Josh exchanging looks with Steve and Tony. "You mean we finally get to meet the weirdos?" whispered Bill. "Yup. The whomper, the weirdo, and the crazy, up close in living color," Wally replied. "In their natural habitat," added Josh. "Yeah, Mom, let's go over there," said Steve loudly. "I'd just love some tea and cookies." His mother looked at him suspiciously. "They make good cookies, too," said Peter, nodding. "You want some cookies, Dougie?" "Just let me get all the bags upstairs and clean up a bit," said Mr. Benson, reaching into the back of the van for some of the suitcases. Mrs. Hatford took 2 of them and started for the house. "I'll call and let the Malloys know we're coming," said Mrs. Hatford. Upstairs, the boys ran from room to room, seeing where each of them was going to sleep, pulling things out of suitcases, trading comic books, and throwing underpants at each other. When Jake and Josh closed the door of their living room after Tony and Steve were inside, however, Wally knew they must be planning something. Whatever it was, he wanted to be in on it. "Come on," he said to Bill and Danny, and the 3 boys converged on the twins' bedroom. At first, Jake wasn't going to let them in, but after he peeked outside to make sure Peter and Doug weren't there, he let Wally and the two chubby Benson boys into the room. Then he locked the door. "Tony's got a great idea. Listen." Tony was sitting on the edge of Josh's bed, his feet on one of the army cots Mrs. Hatford had put in the room. "We've been thinking how we could help you get back at the girls for all the stuff they've done to you. The snowballs down the neck, the pencil poking in Wally's back. The way they turned Peter into a spy," said Steve. "Caroline making you think she was rabid," said Danny. "And the time she put lima beans in the brownies." Tony's grin widened. "What we're going to do, see, is make them think our old house is haunted." Wally made a face. "They'll never fall for it, Eddie particularly." "Don't be so sure," Tony said mysteriously. He took a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. It looked as though it were 100 years old. "Handle it gently," he said. The paper was yellowed and the edges raggedy. One edge, in fact, was torn as though it had been ripped from a notebook. The brown ink was blurred, and the words seemed to have been written with an old quill pen. There were stains in the center of the page. "March 23rd, 1867, it said in the upper right corner. The date was so faint that Wally could hardly read it. "Read it out loud," Tony urged him. So Wally cleared his throat and began. "Yesterday was the saddest day of my life here on Island Avenue, and I am so overcome with grief that I hardly know what I'm about. My sister Annabelle was found in the river yesterday, having gone down with me to see the high water. Her guardian angel must have deserted her, for her foot slipped, and the swirling water carried her away before I could grab her. Oh, the look on her face as she cried out to me has burned its image into my heart. I ran along the riverbank as far as the road bridge, screaming as I went, but no one came in time, and the water carried her under. She was found later on the other side of Island Avenue, caught in the brush along shore. Her body lies in the parlor now as neighbors come to call. A candle at her head and feet, and my eyes are so swollen from crying I durst not let them see me. But strangest of all, I know that Annabelle is with me yet. For when we used to lie together in our bed of a morning, we would sometimes amuse ourselves by each in turn rapping out a rhythm of an unnamed song on the wall behind our heads, the other to guess what song it might be. And late last night, after her body was laid out in her black dress and lace collar, I went to my room and was startled to hear the tappity-tap of a song. A song I know well, and my blood ran cold to hear it. "I'll take you home again, Kathleen." She used to tap out that song for me to guess, my own name being Kathleen, and it pleased me much. But it pleases me no more, for I can only guess that, because I could not save her. She will come again in the night for me to take me with her. Wally stared hard at the piece of paper after he'd finished reading, and then at Tony. Jake and Josh were staring too, their lips parted and their eyes huge. "Where did you find that?" Jake asked. "In the wall of my room, when we used to live where the Malloys are now, of course," said Tony. "What? You never told us about it." "That's because it never happened," Tony said, trying hard not to smile. "What?" said Josh. Steve and Tony burst into laughter, and Tony had to explain. "I got a kit for my birthday that will make any piece of paper look old. It's got ink and a quill pen, and when you write something, you brush this kind of liquid over the paper and stick it in the oven for 10 minutes, and it turns yellow and spots appear." "But the words, 'I durst not let them see me'? No one talks like that anymore, Tony. How could you make that up?" "I know. I copied it out of a book and changed the words around a little, adding Island Avenue for one thing." "How did you come up with the title of that song?" asked Wally. "My grandmother used to sing it. It's supposed to be a love song, I think. 'I'll take you home again, Kathleen,' but it sounds sort of spooky if a ghost says it." Jake's mind was already at work. "Okay, so you're going to tell the girls you found a page out of a diary in your wall when you lived there. Caroline's in your room now. How are you going to convince even her that there's a ghost hanging around?" "I've got it all figured out," said Tony, and his brothers grinned. That's the end of chapter 3. Chapter 4 is called Pleased to Meet You.